This is being recorded, so you're all over 21. Okay, I gave part of this year. I gave this year actually at Darchei Noam one Shabbos morning after davening at the early minyan. And I looked around the room and I said, good, there are not too many kids here. The kids weren't there. It's a shiur that is all based on, it's a Gemara, and it's in the Torah. Tamima brings it, and it's based on how Chazal viewed our wonderful Avos and our wonderful tzaddikim. Of course, we're talking about Yosef HaTzadik. And Chazal tell the truth. Chazal do not whitewash. We talked yesterday about David HaMelech, the Pashut Pshat, the simple literal translation in the Navi is definitely not a compliment to David HaMelech. The Gemara, of course, and Rishonim, Achronim, philosophers, they deal with it in their own way, but the Torah doesn't pull punches. It tells us the truth in literal words. So we have to assess what we teach children and what we as adults have to understand from both the Pashut Pshat. We should remember that children are our pure efforts, and hopefully they stay pure and innocent and righteous their entire lives. And that's why they're shielded from certain things. Certain things are not taught, or certain things are not spelled out to children. But we have to understand that the Torah is talking to Lo nitna haTorah lamalachei hashares. The Torah was not given to the angels. The Torah was given livnei Adam, to people, and people are people. What makes somebody a tzaddik? And we shouldn't sugarcoat our tzaddikim that they are always sitting and learning and have the black hat and the long beard. They once asked little kids the pictures of, and you must have heard this anecdote. It's a true story. They had pictures of Bedouins and pictures of Gedolim. Gedolim, we understand Gedolim, long beards and hats, and they asked kids, who did Avraham Avinu look like? And of course, the kids picked the people sitting, the tzaddikim sitting and learning. Of course, that's what Avraham Avinu looked like. And you can bet 91-1, if not more, that Avraham Avinu looked like the Bedouins. You know, he might have had, he definitely had a hadras panim, definitely was shining in countenance, looked different, a man of God, but he definitely did not have a strommel and a bekasha and a long, might have had a long beard, but definitely did not look like the Rosh Yeshiva. So you can understand what we tell kids and what we teach kids an image, or we try to give them an image, and perhaps it's not the healthiest thing. Perhaps we should, in schools, let children see history. We have a lot of pictures going back almost 200 years now. Jewish communities, let them see pictures of Orthodox. We don't have to give them non-Orthodox people. Let them see different Orthodox people and their communities, and what the communities did and how they survived. The young Israel, which was definitely, if not saved Judaism, definitely kept Judaism together in the early 1900s. The young Israel had dances for people to meet, for singles to meet. Today, that's unheard of in the Orthodox world, but that's what was the necessary, because they felt if they don't have mixers that teenagers will want to come to, they'll go to mixers from the non-Orthodox, and there'll be a bigger problem. Orthodox communities, you still have a lot of people. You had a lot of people who did not look like the Rosh Yeshiva, people who went to work who didn't wear a yarmulke, but they were as frum as the people today who sit in Daf Yomi in the morning. But they couldn't wear a yarmulke back in those days. I wear a yarmulke all my entire career. I work in Brooklyn. I work in Midwood. So I'm blessed with the ability to tell my students, look outside, that's what I look like. That's what I wear, that's what I dress like. If I worked in a different community, who knows what challenges I would be up to. You can't judge people by what they had to go through. I had a professor in Brooklyn College. I remember one summer, Dr. Wolf Snow, Belleville, he was known to people. Dr. Wolf Snow did not wear a yarmulke, but I could see the outline of his white shirt. I saw the tzitzis, not hanging out, but I could see the tzitzis. A very frum man, math professor, excellent professor, Olav Shalom. But this was an era when very frum people lived this way. So kids maybe should see different communities, read histories of different frum communities. They should look at the community in Frankfurt, very frum community that Rabbi Hirsch established, and they did not look at all like they do in Passaic today. But they were frum, and from them came today's frum communities. And maybe that's a healthier way to teach people that you can be a tzaddik based on what your heart and mind and your actions do. And even though you fail, you can still be a tzaddik. You can still come back. You don't have to look like a tzaddik. You have to act. You have to pray to be like a tzaddik. So let's look at first something about Yosef had to play a very strong role, as Yosef had to hide the fact that he was the brother in Mitzrayim. And it was very hard for him, but he played a role very, very well. It tells us many times that Yosef went away from his brothers and cried privately because the emotion got to him that here he is, and he has to put his brothers through the hell that he put them through for whatever reason, either to actualize the nevuah, to bring forth the prophecy that Yosef is going to be the leader of Bnei Yisrael Mitzrayim, or to have them do tshuva for what they did. And in this week's parsha, Vayigash, when he finally breaks down and reveals himself, it says, Vayitein is kol b'chi. Yosef is crying the entire time because it was not for him any pleasure. It was very painful to him to have to see his brothers in this anguish. Okay, but Yosef played a role very well. Let's look back at Parshas Miketz. Yosef says, Vayish'al lahem shalom. He asked them for peace. How are you? He welcomed them. He greeted them. Vayomer hashalom avichem hazaken asher amartem. Is your elderly father still alive? Asher amartem, that you told me about, how Odenu Chai, is he still alive? Is he at peace? Is he alive? Vayomru shalom. They answered like they would to a king. Vayomru shalom li'avdacha li'avinu Odenu Chai. Peace, there is peace to your servant, our father, Odenu Chai. He's still alive. Vayiktu vayishtachavu, and they prostrated themselves and they bowed to him. Rabbi Yehuda says, and I got to give you the last pasuk, the next to the penultimate pasuk, good word, right? The penultimate pasuk in Vayechi, Yosef says to Bnei Yisrael, now they're called Bnei Yisrael, when you are redeemed by God, you shall take up to Eretz Yisrael, you shall take up my bones with you, my remains. Yosef refers to himself as bones, not Star Trek here. It's not bones. He literally meant bones. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Gemara says, Mipnei ma nikra Yosef atzamos b'chayav. Why was Yosef called bones during his life? Why did he refer to himself as bones? It's not kavod, right? He should say, Halisem Osi, take me out. That's what Yaakov said. I don't want to be here. Take me out. He didn't refer to himself as my body, my remains. Because Yosef did not protest when his father's respect was diminished. Lo micha, he didn't stand ground and say, don't refer to the father as Avdacha. You don't have to refer to him as my servant. He let his father be referred to as La'avdacha La'avinu, your servant, our father. That they said to him, peace La'avdacha, to your servant, to our father, and he didn't answer them anything. Question is, what could he have answered them? He's playing a role here. What could he have done? And that'll come into the next drasha. Yosef lived how many years? How many years did Yosef live? 110 years. Good. And the other brothers lived 120 years. Levi lived 120 years, and Levi was 137, my mistake. Moshe lived 120, and they assumed that the average life of a tzaddik would have been 120. So Yosef, by the Torah telling us, it doesn't mean he would have lived 120. It means by the Torah telling us 110 years, it's an unusual number in the pantheon of tzaddikim's lives, 110. They say, and he died first of his brothers. So Chazal say, oh, there's a lesson here. He would have lived 10 years more, but he didn't. Why? Because if you count the times that were said, Avdacha Avinu, there are 10 references to Avdacha Avinu. In Vayigash, in this week's Parsha, the brothers say to him, Yehuda, who goes to Yosef, goes to defend Binyamin. Yehuda says, Vayomer Avdacha Avinu Aleinu, your servant, our father, your servant, my father, Yehuda. So talking. So Avdacha Avinu. 5 times, you can count them. 5 times, but the Chazal say 10 times. He was punished, 1 for each 10. 1 for each of them. So where did the 10 come in? Okay, if you look in Miketz, it says when Yosef meets Binyamin, when the brothers, before that, when the brothers are talking that Aval Hashem Manachnu, we are guilty because we didn't listen to the anguish of our brother's anguish screaming when he was thrown in the pit. And that's why all this Sarah befell us, that Shimon is taken, that he's telling us, bring your younger brother down. So it says, Vayisav me'alehem vayevk. At first it says, below, they did not know that Yosef was among them. They didn't know that Yosef understands Hebrew, but they were talking. Because there was the interpreter, whether it's Yosef's son or any interpreter, the interpreter was with him. So Yosef is hearing this from an interpreter, even though Yosef knows full well Lushan Kodesh, knows full well Hebrew. You're not going to hear Hasidim don't refer to it as Hebrew. They refer to it as Lushan Kodesh. Okay, so I'm just telling you that the Muncie speak. You're not going to hear, he knew Hebrew, but everyone else knows there's an interpreter. As any foreign person would come to the viceroy in Egypt, there's going to be an interpreter. Like we have a signer in court all the time. On TV, there's always a signer, a sign language. That's an interpreter. So what did Yosef do? Every interaction with his brothers was through an interpreter. So Yosef heard Avdecha Avinu from the brothers once, 5 times. The interpreter did his job of interpretation beautifully. Interpreted into Egyptian, Avdecha Avinu, your servant, our father. Add them all up, it's 10. Double the 5 that are mentioned in the Torah, he heard it 10 times. I have a question though. How could you punish him for the first time? Or the first 2 times? How could you punish him? The first reference to Avdecha Avinu, and he heard the interpreter say Avdecha Avinu. How do you punish him the first time? He should be punished how many times? 4. 4 times 2, the next 4. But the first one is part of the act. He didn't know that they're going to say, your servant, our father. He could have stopped them. But how do you punish him for the first time? Right? Why is he punished 9 for the 1 and 2? I can understand 3 through 10. Why lose a year of life for the first 2 times? Let's look at the words of Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav. They said to him, Avdecha Avinu Amar Lahem Midi, and he didn't say anything to them. What could he have said? Had Yosef broken character for a second, or even in character, he could have said, oh, your father, your elderly father, let's revere him. You don't have to refer to him as my servant. Your father will never be my servant. He could have said something. He could have come up with something. He could have plotted something. He didn't. Maybe he felt that he couldn't get out of character at all. Or he could have told the interpreter, especially if the interpreter was his son. He could have told the interpreter in Egyptian, don't refer to that man as Avdecha Avinu. Don't refer to your grandfather or to my father as Avdecha Avinu. Yosef didn't. La Omar Lahem Midi. He didn't say anything. He didn't say anything. So the Torah is saying, not just times 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Show that you are taking the kavod. You're not mocha. You're not advocating for the kavod of your father. You didn't stop them. Even the first 2 times, you're going to be punished for that. It shows that this kavod went to your head, Yosef. You didn't stand in for kavod av. So you're going to be punished not just 8 times, but for 10 years. Yes.
This is like the culmination of his dream that, the brothers and the parents.
It is.
So
absolutely.
So why should he protest what Hashem told him was going to happen?
Okay. Your father is going to come, and it says by Yishtachu Yisrael al Rosh Hamita, next week Parsha. Yisrael on his deathbed bows down to the head of the bed towards Yosef. So, and Rashi says, because at this point Yaakov is bowing down to Yosef. Why? Because a lion in his day, Rashi says, and I think another animal, a tiger in his day. Yaakov realizes, yeah, I'm Yaakov, but Yosef is the king now, so bow down to him, gave him his due. Doesn't mean Yosef should accept servitude from his father. Doesn't it mean Yosef should in any way, the prophecy is that Yaakov has to bow down. Should Yosef accept as a subjugation? No. And that's what he did by not being mocha, by not finding a way to say no. He's showing that it's okay with me. You'd be punished. I'm not sure Yosef, it's not okay. I'm sure he felt that they're referring to Yaakov as Avdecha, my servant. Yosef never intended that his father should be his servant. But you can't let them say that. You have to stop that. You're a tzaddik, Yosef. Let's talk about his tzidkus now. The story with Eshes Potiphar. It says she tried to seduce him. And she was probably very successful. She would have definitely been successful had it not been for what Chazal tell us was the mus diyukno shel aviv, the visage of his father. the thought of his father. And we're going to see what the Torah Tamima brings down, a beautiful in the bracha of Yosef. I'm just going to find it. I lost it. I know everyone's waiting to hear this. Here it is. In the bracha to Yosef, the Torah, what Yaakov says to Yosef is a pasuk that is a weird pasuk. In fact, a lot of the brachos were weird psukim that are not usually said together, like the eyes will be bloodshed with wine. This is the bracha to Yehuda. I mean, it's poetic, and it's a beautiful, intricate bracha. It was poetic. But to Yosef, you're going to see it. You're going to see there's many interpretations, but I'm going to use the Gemara. But let's look at what happened with Eshes Potiphar. Yosef was by Yosef Yefei Soar Bifei Mara in Mitzrayim. Yosef, everything was going good. He was the head servant in this house. He had the run of the place. Everything was going good for him. So it says by Yosef Yefei Soar Bifei Mara. This Yosef, he's 30 years old now, not a teenager anymore, but he Yefei Soar, he spent his time looking good. Bifei Mara, he was beautiful. He was very attractive. He worked out. He was living the life. So immediately the Torah tells us, immediately upon these things, because I'll say right after, this is what you're doing. Your father is mourning you in Eretz Canaan. You know your father is mourning you if he's still alive from the pain. And this is what you're doing. And his master's wife picks her eyes up to Yosef, puts her eyes on him and says, sleep with me. Bayima'ain, and it's Bayima'ain. It's one of the shalshelashes. Shalshelash is something that takes a long time to say. And just like the shalshelas in Parsha Shmini, where Moshe is doing the shchita, right? And Chazal tell us why there's there a shalshelas on that word, Vayishchat, that he slaughtered. That was the last avoda that Moshe did in the Mishkan. After that, it was his brother Aaron HaKohen. So Moshe didn't want to let go of being like the Kohen Gadol. He didn't want to let go of that opportunity. So he spent a long time. He had to let go finally. He had to relinquish control, relinquish the kavod. To him, it was more than a kavod. It was the avodas Hashem of the Mishkan. He had to give up what he loved to Aaron HaKohen. Here, by Yema'ain, Yosef had a very tough time withstanding Eshes Adonov. And he reasons. He says, there's no one greater in this house than me, and your husband didn't conceal anything from me. Let me do everything except that you're his wife. It's the only thing that's off limits for me. And how can I do this? And I will chatasi lelokim, I will be sinful to God. She didn't stop. By Yehi Kedabra Elo Yosef, Yom Yom, she talked to him daily. Yom Yom. Below Shama Eleha Lios, Ilishkab Etzlo Lios Ima. And he did not give in. Listen to her. Lishkav Etzlo is to lie next to her. Lios Ima, to be with her. She was saying to him, it's okay. We don't have to sleep together. Let's snuggle. Lishkav Etzlo. Let's be together. Lios Ima. Hang out with me. She tried everything. You look at the words. First she says, Shichva Imi. Lie with me. That's what you think it is. Then when she says, Lishkav Etzlo, lie Etzlo next to her. That's not exactly the deed. Lios Ima is even not in the bedroom, not right. Be with her. Let's go to the garden. And she's, how did he say this? She's relentless. Vayihi kahayom hazeh, and it happened on that day. Kahayom hazeh, It's always a day. There's always an opportunity. And Yosef came home to do his malacha. Chazal tell us which malacha did he come to do. It's a machlokas. To do his work? Oh no, to do his work with Eshes Potiphar. He was ready to give in. Ready to give in. Ain ish me'anshi abayis. The Torah tells us that was a day that there was nobody home. Nobody was going to break in on them. No one would know. But bevigdo leimor shichva imi. Now she doesn't say shichva etzli. Shichva imi. Sleep with me. She grabs his clothing. Vayazov bigdo biyada vayanas vayetze halchutza. And he left. This is where Chazal tell us he had the image of his father. We'll talk about it. He left his clothes in her hand, and he vayanas, and he fled, He fled vayetze halchutza, and he went outside. And if I do this year, next year, or in a subsequent year, I'm going to try to understand why sometimes it says she tells the story to the people, she tells the story to her husband, and she sees. So there's four things here. What he did, the Torah says, and what she sees, she says, she sees vayanos vayetze. She sees vayanos, fled, vayetze, and left. She tells the people, no, vayanos, halchutza, he fled. She tells the husband, vayetze, halchutza, and the words change. The story has changed. And why does she change the story? That's for another shiur. In Vayechi, in Yaakov's bracha to Yosef, just let the people here know, nobody got off, nobody left yet from the Zoom. Nobody left. I won't tell you who's on the Zoom. It's all private information, but nobody left. The good stuff is coming, unfortunately. Yaakov is blessing Yosef. And Yaakov says, Bein Poros Yosef, Yosef, a noble, outstanding son, Bein Poros Ale Oyin, outstanding son already at the source, Banos To'adale, sure daughters, she too stepped over the wall. They say that the girls from Mitzrayim, like the Beatles, like to look at the Beatles, they went crazy when they saw Yosef. They climbed the fences of the palace, the walls, to catch a glimpse of this Yosef. He was so charming, so attractive. Thus, when they heaped bitter abuse upon him and plotted enmity, this is the brother selling him with deep hatred. The masters of the arrows, that's Shimon and Levi, the masters of the arrows, what they did to Shechem with their swords, chose him as their target. Vateshev v'eson kashto. Vayafozu zro'ei yada. His bow, nevertheless, or is it a bow, remained unshakably calm, even when the arms of his hands were already bedecked with gold from the hands of the power that uplifts Yaakov, which from there shepherds the stone of Israel. What does that mean? So Hirsch says, after he goes through some grammar, Rav Hirsch says, thus Yosef remained calm even when the arms of his hands were endowed with utmost power, or even when they were bedecked with royal adornments as ordained by the Almighty. Okay, so let's focus on these words. Vayafozu zro'ei yada. His hands were endowed with the utmost, his hands, he remained calm, even when the arms of his hands were endowed with the utmost power. The arms were endowed with utmost power. Let's listen to this Gemara. Torah Tamima brings it. Vateshev ve'eson, and he sat, Vateshev, he remained, ve'eson, eson kashto. Eson means calm his bow. What are they talking about? Amar Rav Yochanan Mishum Rav Meir. Bisha shetov'o ishes Potiphar leYosef v'tispesehu utafasto b'dikta. At the time that Eshes Potiphar seduced Yosef and caught him with his garments, like, aha, you're not getting away now. And he was ready to do the deed. Ba'at Diyukno shel aviv v'nira salo b'chalon. His father's visage, he had a vision. He sees his father in the window. Amar lo Yosef. Father says, Asiden achicha sheyikasbu al avnei ephod v'ata beinehem. In the future, your brothers and you will be on the avnei ephod, on the breastplate of the Kohen. You're going to be in the shuls on the breastplate, on the shield of Bnei Yisrael. Ritzoncha sheyimacha shimcha mi beinehem. Do you want that your name should be erased? You do this, Yosef, you're not worthy. You will no longer be worthy. Miyad batesha be'esan kashta. Chazal, the Torah is speaking in euphemisms. Kashta refers to the male organ. Batesha be'esan sheshava, that it returned. Kashto le'esano. It returned to its previous state, le'esano, to its calm state. Vayafozu zroe yada. The Gemara tells us his arms, vayafozu zroe yadav, even when the arms of his hands were already, as Hirsch says, even the arms of his hands were endowed with utmost power, powerful hands. What did he do with his hands, Chazal say? No'atz yadav bekarka. He was about to do it. This was the worst possible moment for Yosef. He was going to engage with Eshes Potiphar. And he gets this image, whether he sees his father or he thinks of his father, it means it dawned on him, I must stop this now. Noatz yado bekarka. He planted his hands, his arms on the ground. And you can only imagine where Yosef's body was in position. And Eshes Potiphar is so tempting. And he didn't do the deed. But what did he do? V'yatza shichva zera mibein tziparnei yadav. Shichva zera, seminal emission, emanated from mibein tziparnei yadav, between the nails of his hands. Try to understand the imagery. Yosef was ready to do the deed. We're not talking foreplay, we were talking play. He was ready to do the deed. But he got right before the deed would have been done, he said no. And he planted his hands until the entire arousal passed. So much so that whatever emission, whatever feeling he would have had came through his fingernails. That means there was no bodily pleasure whatsoever. Chazal tell us that if a person is with his wife and she's parsa nida b'shas tashmish, if a woman feels a menstrual flow, an emission during intercourse, what should the husband do? Yinots, ziparno, yinots yada bekarka, this exact thing. Plant yourself firmly, plant your hands firmly until the feeling subsides. They take this from the Gemara, what Yosef did. And so much so that Yosef is called tzaddik, because to be able to repress at the moment you're about to do an avera, to be able to withhold that desire, it's a second more, and to say, no, I'm not going to sin, that's what makes you a tzaddik. Tzaddikim are not those that don't face temptation. Tzaddikim are those that know how to say no to temptation. And that's why Yosef remains the leader of Klal Yisrael, and that's why Yosef is on, not only that, Yosef had two Shvatim, Menashe and Ephraim, because he remained true to the ideals that how can I do this to Ashes Potiphar, to a man's wife, the Chatasi Leilokim, and I would sin to God. That's what Yosef couldn't do. And that's why he's a tzaddik. You can't tell this to kids. That's why some things in Torah you have to be older to appreciate. But we see that our tzaddikim truly are tzaddikim. And for the rest of us, if we do sin and if we don't catch ourselves in time, we have David HaMelech as an example. You can be a great king. You can be the great leader who Mashiach will come from. We can fail, but there's always a way back through tshuva. May we pray that those who need to do tshuva do. The greatest and the great of Klal Yisrael are not those that fail. There are those that pick themselves up, can say no, and can say I'm sorry, and do tshuva. A good Hanukkah and a good Chodesh.